Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
Working from home too today. We're not in the studio, as you can tell. And well, no, you probably can't tell, but we're not in the studio today. It's still closed. And we come to you live every Thursday, noon to 1, powered by New West Recovery. And here we are trying to talk about addiction recovery issues every Thursday. And of course, New West Recovery is brought to you by Last Door in Westminster House. Darren, this is our 8th season of shows. Yes, excellent. Congratulations to you and to me for doing this for 8 years now. So super excited about that. And, you know, we try to start the show off with some interesting topics and announcement from Alberta in regards to safe consumption sites. The province announced something interesting that's caused quite the ripple on Twitter to use a consumption site. They're asking people to provide personal health care numbers, PHNs, to access services, and that's caused quite the stir.
This is out of Alberta, not yet in BC?
It's the first province in all of Canada, and probably North America to actually implement such a thing. So for people that don't know what that means, like you can go to a consumption site and use drugs, and you just give you you don't even have to give your real name. You go by a handle name. A lot of people use handle names as well. So there's just handle names, and Alberta wants to change that where they actually know who's using consumption sites, and by having PHNs, they know who these people are. And a lot of people talk about barriers. People won't use the consumption sites and so forth. It will cause barriers, and people don't have PHNs. I mean, they know that. I think the people that run the government and run healthcare know some people that use drugs probably don't have healthcare numbers. So I'm sure they'll have a system in place to help get those healthcare numbers and get that sorted out. So it's quite interesting. But you know, I was doing some research, and it's interesting because there's other countries that have consumption sites. Like we're not the first place to do that, and it's quite interesting because Canada is actually one of the only countries, and I don't know if this is still to this day, I mean, ever since this paper was written, is one of the only countries in the world that has no eligibility requirements for consumption sites. So for example, in some countries, if you want to use a consumption site, you have to use the terms of agreement. You know, some of these agreements are you won't sell drugs inside. You won't come to the facility already high. You have to get high in the facility. You need healthcare numbers and all that as well. So it's quite interesting that when I looked at it, places like Europe and Germany, they all have eligibility requirements. And the only country that didn't have eligibility requirements was Canada. And I don't know why, you know, 20 years ago when they opened up Insight, why nobody looked at that and be like, hey, how come we're the only country that doesn't have eligibility requirements to use a consumption site? So they say eligibility requirements cause barriers, but then they say all the evidence out of Europe, you know, consumption sites save lives. But if you go to Norway, Spain, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and I'm reading it all here, all of them have Luxembourg, they all have Australia, they all have eligibility requirements. You have to be 18 years of age to use them. No dealing drugs in or outside of the consumption site. And, you know, for our crisis movie, we have footage of people selling drugs at the consumption sites in Vancouver. It's interesting, that it's just a subtle thing that nobody really picks up on. And in Canada, apparently eligibility requirements are going to kill people, but in these European countries, they all have eligibility requirements. So
like you were saying, my devil's advocate position was like, it's going to diminish the amount of people that can access it, because I don't know about you, but for me,
it doesn't limit them in Europe, though. You sound like you're on Twitter, Darren.
Well, no, but I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. Like when I didn't have ID, or like all of that stuff was lost, like how difficult it was, to go to detox if I didn't, have like just a simple birth certificate.
Sorry, Darren, I'm going to interrupt. This is the thing, right? Like, as if they're not going to give people access. It's like you have to have a PHN. But you know what? I'm sure they're going to have a system where you can still use the consumption site. There's not going to be a guard there. No PHN. Don't come in. I went to detox without ID. It happens. It's just another layer of accountability. I think it's a great idea, and everyone's
I think it's necessary because it's supposed to be that first line of service. You know what I mean? So that when people come in, they can track how much, how many people are using the services, how many people ask for detox information or treatment information. And if they have that,
how many of them are alive? How many of them are dead?
Right.
Just look at this eligibility for Australia. Already drug dependent. So how do they even know if someone's already drug dependent? Do you remember that documentary that went crazy on YouTube a while ago where the guy he filmed himself. It was the first time using heroin and they showed him how to use it at the consumption site. And everyone, people were like, oh, he's here. That wouldn't, in this country, apparently it won't happen because you already have to be drug. How do they know you're already drug dependent? It's quite interesting.
It's just for
it's interesting how people are losing their minds over this. It's like, the Twitter comments are just absolutely insane. If it's healthcare, why not ask people for their PHNs when they can, or help people get PHNs? Why not? Like that's the question. Why not?
That's what I'm saying is that could be the first service that can say, okay, let's get you going on the ID, and let's get you a PHN number, like right there, like as a part of the service.
I know. Anyway, wild Canada. So you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We try to bring you all sides of addiction recovery issues. We like to talk about the recovery side. Hope you like what you're hearing. And we talk to people each week about their lived experience, their books they write, and their stories of addiction recovery and overcoming addiction. So we always enjoy inviting our guests to the show. And today we've got a great guest joining us. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Yeah, super excited. We get to talk with Vanisha Breault. Welcome to the show, the author of Ordinary Courage. You are the founder, CEO of the Terminator Foundation, a nonprofit organization helping youth overcome addiction. You also have about 20 plus episodes of a podcast by the same name, Ordinary Courage. You're a coach. You can find all of this at Vanisha's website, vanishabreault.com. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you guys. Yeah.
Hi, Vanisha.
Hi.
This is fantastic. As a fellow crusader for social justice, that's what this show is all about. 20 to 22 years ago, when I was getting clean or trying to get clean, in my family, it was a family problem. Like, let's keep it in home. Let's keep it quiet. Let's keep it, secretive. And even the therapy, if you will, or treatment I got was very like one-on-one in a room, step 5, only with you and someone you trust. And now, here we are, your story is a book, it's a podcast, and you've pledged your life to live out loud, as so many of our guests are doing and saying. In your experience, how are we doing with stigma? I mean, obviously there's more improvement, but is there more specifically where like things we need to tackle in Canada? Can you give your input on that?
Yeah, no, I can relate to so much of what you shared already, Darren, like how you're talking about your family and your upbringing. It kind of mirrors my own experience and family and upbringing and stuff like that. And I absolutely do think that we have made some headway. We've definitely pioneered a way forward when it comes to addiction and mental health. But I absolutely also agree that we still have a long way to go. Like we definitely, and I think it's just everything that we're doing. You know what I mean? Everything that you guys are doing with the Recovery Capital Conference and everything that last door, like all of the out loud conversations that we're having and getting on these platforms. And I think we just need to keep hitting it. You know what I mean? All of us together, collaborating and, together to just keep pushing this thing forward from wherever we are in Canada and internationally and wherever it is that we come from. It's all of our stories out loud that's just going to get louder and louder and louder. You know what I mean? So
I mean, I love it. We have the full hour to talk about the Terminator Foundation, but it just sounds like, I mean, that is the purpose beyond anything, is just to provide that space for people to have that beginning. And that's one of my questions before we get into everything. Like, if you can't write a book about your story, or let's say a family's listening and they're in the midst of it right now, like it's hard to open the door freely to neighbors and family about, what's going on in addiction and mental health and the stress and the, the turmoil.
Mhm.
What's the beginning? Like, how does a family begin that living out loud component?
I just even like, I don't, and I know you guys will relate to this, but I don't ever want to forget where I came from. I don't ever want to forget what that silence and what that shame felt like. And so even just you saying what you just said, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And because honestly, even when I did come out, I didn't know I was coming out. I didn't know I was doing something loud. You know what I mean? I just, but honestly, that probably the first step for me was just that, the first step of saying it out loud to someone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Someone outside of my immediate family of four walls, where you keep everything hidden, quiet, under wraps. You know what I mean? So just outside of those four walls. And I even talk about that in the book of it. Just, even when it did come out of me, some of my truth started to come out of me. It was almost like it was someone else speaking. You know what I mean? And because I had it bottled up and, knocked down so much that when it did surface, it was like,
it's so interesting. A lot of our guests that have, taken the time to write a book and, a biography of such about like intimate, vulnerable experiences. Many of them have said it wasn't like they didn't think much beyond the effect of writing or who they're writing it for to help others, that it was sort of a personal journey, if you will, and they came to that crossroads of, do I publish this? Like, do I actually, do I have to, get permission from those involved? What was that experience like for you?
So for me, it took me, like, I actually had people telling me, like, the more I started to kind of open up and share my story a little bit, then I had people saying, oh my gosh, you should write a book. Oh my gosh, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. You need to write a book. And so I heard that message for probably a few years. And because I didn't have the courage, I didn't believe in myself, like, to write a book. Like, you know, and stuff like that. And so it took a while to even get there. And then I finally got there and started to put it together. And I remember, because even the book itself, it took me almost 5 years to write it.
Wow.
And I remember looking back on the notes that I had done with the coach that I was working with, and you break it all down. And then, you know, one of the last questions that you answer is sort of like, what do you hope that this book is going to do for you personally, getting it out there? And I had put, it will set me free.
Wow.
And so honestly, when I pulled that out, when I finally finished the book, and when I finished writing the last part of the book, it was July 3rd. It was just before midnight. And I remember that feeling, like I felt free.
Mm.
And so for me, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the most freeing things I've ever done, you know.
Without knowing what it was going to do for others, like it, you know, now reflecting and hindsight, and you know, what is it that this book can and will do for the reader?
It's hope. It's that honestly, there's hope. Like if we just keep going, if we just keep moving, if we just keep doing the next right thing, even if we don't even really totally know what that is, or even sometimes what that means sometimes, but just to keep moving forward. Like, so, and
that's the whole conversation about recovery, is that there is recovery, and it's not just about substance use. There's recovery for mental health and trauma. And
yes.
So the book is called Ordinary Courage. And you said just about a couple of minutes ago, I didn't have the courage, you know, so how does this book help people find that ordinary courage? And because there's when we talk about sexual abuse, you know, there's a process in even just saying it and allowing people to hear that, because you know there's the I'm never going to tell a soul, to, you know, I've been in groups where somebody expressed their sexual abuse, but it was an interesting way they said it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others when they say it, and it's like in the healing phase, like I want to heal with this. So how does this book help somebody who right now is listening to this show, or somebody knows somebody that's having a really hard time, you know, not even able to say the word sexual abuse? Does this book help that? And how did you get from like absolutely no courage to having courage?
Yeah, that's so good, Giuseppe. Like I'm convinced that the book can be a resource to help people, even just to know that they're not alone, because the book is pretty raw. It's pretty vulnerable. We talk about a lot of things in the book that we don't normally like to talk about. And so, yeah, I'm hoping and praying and believing that the book is going to reach people that have been stuck or have been too afraid to this point to come forward with their story. And even for those that have maybe started on that journey a little bit, maybe it gives them just a little bit more courage, or, you know, strength, and hope to just keep going in that journey. But you touched on something too that I 100% can relate to. I remember, because I grew up I grew up in an alcoholic family, but I was also sexually molested multiple times by many family members. And I remember when I first, you know, things kind of got blown up, and I started in therapy. I was probably about 12 years old, and I couldn't even put the words together. I couldn't say what happened. Like I had to go through months of therapy just to be able to say the words. And so going, from there to, and then even, and then to have that same experience happen in my own family, in my own marriage, I think the courage really for me came when I decided to stop hiding from my story. Like I couldn't change it. I couldn't change my upbringing. I couldn't change the fact that my parents were alcoholics and that my mom is schizophrenic. Like I couldn't change the fact that we grew up poor. Like we don't get to choose the families that we're born into. And for so long in my life, I didn't want to, tell anyone where I came from because of the stigma, because of the shame, because then if you come from one of those families, you're looked at like you're lower class, you're not as intelligent, you're not as, you know what I mean? You're just somehow the measuring stick doesn't measure you, and so it was through writing the book and all of this stuff that I just stopped. I decided to step into my story. I can't change it. It is what it is, and that's what I'm hoping that people will get out of that, is to just step into their story.
And your addiction, I'm not sure if you were an alcoholic or what your addiction was.
Yeah.
Was this your whole life that you had issues with substances, or did it, like, how, when you found out about your daughter and your partner, and I guess you had two explosions, one when you were 12 years old, and now you have another one, thinking, I've got this partner, I got a great family, and no, not again, this is happening. Did your addiction spiral out of control before or after that? And
yeah, so
you blame that?
No, well, I mean, at first I did, like
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Absolutely, I did. I justified my drinking with that too, right? So I first, like I mentioned, had alcoholic parents. I grew up in AA. Like I grew up going to AA with my parents. And then I started drinking. Like the first time I ever drank, I was 7. I started getting into alcohol at 12 years of age. By the time I was 18, I was like full on alcoholic. I was having blackouts at 13, stuff.
But you went to AA meetings, so weren't you listening?
Well, obviously not. But you know what it's like. You don't think it's going to happen to you, right? And then you don't even, like, I was just coping. Like I found this thing, alcohol, that just numbed the pain, it numbed the trauma, it numbed, right? And so I never thought I'm going to turn out to be like my mom and dad. And so I was 18, I ended up going to AA on my own. I actually, back then, I almost got kicked out of my first AA meeting because I was too young. Like they were just like, how, you can't be an alcoholic, you're 18. Like, what the hell? And so if it wasn't for an old timer, Ray, I would have gotten kicked out of AA. And so anyways, and then I was sober for years, went to AA, was sober for years. And then it was in this marriage that, I talk about it all in the book and stuff like that. But long story short, I end up kind of drinking again a little bit, very casually, at Christmas or something like that, special occasions, and like nothing happened to me.
Yeah, you got to start out slow to convince yourself that
right. But I didn't like have a little bit of alcohol and I just went right back. You know what I mean? Yeah. Nothing happened. Sometimes I didn't even finish the glass of wine. So I was like, holy crap, I'm normal. I am normal. And then I started to just think, well, maybe I just drank the way I did when I was a kid and a teenager because of all the trauma, all the abuse.
All resolved now.
It's all resolved now. I'm an adult. I'm a grown woman, for crying out loud. I have kids. I have a marriage. I have a bank account. Like I can handle myself, and then the collapse of the marriage, right? And basically the tsunami hits. My life is destroyed. We are literally plunged into poverty. Like we go from, we didn't have to worry about money. I had 4 kids. We had a thriving business. We lived in a $500,000 house. This is like 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like we were one of the top construction companies. Like we just had it all. Like it was thought I had the dream happening. And then all of a sudden I don't. And then all of a sudden too, not all of a sudden, but you know what I mean? And then I, start sipping away on the wine and having just a glass of wine after the kids were in bed to help settle my nerves and take the edge off. And before you knew it, one glass led to two, to three, before you knew it, I was having a bottle, and I wasn't waiting till 9 o'clock when the kids are in bed. Now I'm drinking wine while I'm cooking dinner because like that's classy. Everybody does that.
How did you stop? How did you stop?
I mean, I went on, I ended up drinking for a long time, like probably about 6 years, and it got really bad. It got really ugly. And it at the end, because I was terrified to go back to AA. I thought that was like going backwards. I don't have to go backwards. I should just be able to get a grip on this myself. And so after multiple attempts at trying to quit on my own, I kept relapsing. And my last and final relapse was absolutely horrible. I was, my kids all left me. I was dragged behind a vehicle. The ambulance showed up. And then I found myself in the middle of the street watching all my kids driving away, just fed up with my drinking. And I wanted to kill myself. Like I had literally standing in that street, and I hated myself. I hated myself, and I couldn't handle it anymore. And so I had a spiritual awakening that night. And the next day I went back to AA, and I haven't looked back since. And so my recovery has changed a lot since then. But I went back to the 12 steps and went to some meetings, and then I've been sober since then. And it was through that process that I just that it was all of it, right? The shame of the story. And like to your question, Giuseppe, I absolutely justified my drinking because what had happened to my marriage, my life, my family, my kids. Like I was like, who wouldn't drink? Like, and I justified it too, because I thought if this is the worst thing I'm doing is having a few glasses of wine after work, like lay off. Like I just felt like, because my kids started to get on my case, I considered, in the beginning, I looked at myself like a functioning alcoholic, because I had a job, I had a car, I still paid the bills, things like that. And so, but I wasn't functioning.
It's kind of ironic how, the people in our lives aren't saying, it's okay if mom has a half bottle of wine. She's got a job. She's got a car. She's doing okay. Like no one else is saying that, just our own heads, right? Yeah. And what do you think? Like you must have heard that first run through AA, just one drink, like all of that. How is it now getting sober for the the second time or whatever? Mm-hmm. Like, how far away are you from, just that, hey, I'm just going to have a drink on Christmas? Like what changed? The fact that you already proven that to yourself can't work? Like, because there's a lot of people that experience that, that mindset, right? Where it's like, I'm okay now. I'm a few years sober. And I think I didn't have it with heroin. I'm never going to just use like half the pouch of heroin. Yeah. But for drinkers, right? That's a very real experience. They think they can just have a glass of wine now. Mm-hmm. They're all resolved. Mm-hmm. What do you know about that?
Well, so a couple of things there too, like just even on that note with, because I say that, to my kids and then just even working with the athletes and the people that we do too, like my drug of choice was alcohol, it was wine. But that also doesn't permit me to now smoke a little doobie every once in a while, or, you know what I mean? Just have a little toke or whatever it's called now, you know what I mean? Like because I never had an issue with that. I never really touched drugs, so I can't have a line of cocaine, like, and so I just kind of, to me, it's that all encompassing, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I know for me, what changed this time, and this is again, I think has a lot to do with us having these conversations and stuff like that. It's part of the stigma, because I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and some of what sort of tripped me up was some of my own beliefs, around my own faith, you know what I mean? And even some of the, and this is where I think, like, we're all responsible for this shift in society, not just the government, you know what I mean? And the politicians we all are. The churches need to step up. We all need to step up, all the institutions, you know what I mean? And because it was sort of like, well, like Jesus is the name above all names. And if you're, have faith, like you're not really, I'm kind of botching it here, but I just thought like I was sort of like doing my faith a disservice if I didn't think I was like healed or made whole from addiction. Right. And so and so I totally proved that is not accurate, at least for my life. Right. And so, and then I learned a lot about my faith, going around this again, and even about addiction and all of it, and mental health and all of it, like all of it. I mean, addiction is mental health, you know what I mean? So, and so it just really opened up my eyes just about all of that. And this is that, I think this even comes back to some of that shame piece, some of that stigma, right? It's some of that, like, in order to be normal, you shouldn't have any, we don't want to have any of these labels, because then you're not normal,
I don't know.
Want to be normal.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who is normal though, so I'm still trying to figure that piece out. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We're coming to you live on 100.5 FM, and if you're watching us on YouTube, click subscribe, and you can restream us on your favorite streaming device. We come to you every Thursday. We're actually not live on the radio though. We're 1 week behind. We'll be in the studio soon after this little COVID ordeal is over. And we're talking right now to Vanisha Breault, and she's the author of Ordinary Courage, a book about overcoming addiction, overcoming, the sexual abuse in her family, and just finding redemption and resolve. May I ask, did you find forgiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. That was, man, I wrestled with that, and that was even part of my, really, like, my recovery. That was part of my just really discovering myself and taking ownership of myself and all of that. And yeah, I finally got to the point where I was able to just forgive and totally let him off the hook, and yeah, talk about that in the book too. Yeah, it was incredibly, it was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Yeah, being able to just hang that up.
I can just hear it in your voice. There's some resolve there, and it's if you get to experience people's stories and you get to experience their resolve and their forgiveness, it's one of the most powerful human emotions out there. I had no idea what forgiveness was until I got into the rooms of recovery and started watching other people recover and also forgive, and just so much power in forgiveness compared to not in forgiveness. We're coming up to the end of the show pretty soon. I want to talk about the Terminator Foundation and where you're at today. But I think before we move on, we got to talk about your family and your kids. Like are they? Is a mom like, what are you doing? And all that, and how? Because that's a lot of people stay anonymous in recovery because I don't want to put that on my kids. And I mean, I know the power of not being anonymous. We talked about at the beginning of the show, Recovery Out Loud. So how, what's going on with your kids today and your family today?
So there so I have 4 children, and 3 out of 4 are doing amazing. And Carissa, my oldest daughter, the one that was sexually abused by my ex-husband, her stepfather, in the book, she actually shares in the book herself. She writes herself in the book too, and just shares her experience, her strength, her hope, and she's also in recovery, and has chosen to just live a life of sobriety. She never went down any really dark, ugly roads, but as we know, there's lots of ways that we can escape rather than just drugs or alcohol, right? And so you can read about her story in the book too, but she realized, through like actually a blog of Brene Brown's where she talks about the poo-poo platter. And Carissa was like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. And anyway, so she's living in recovery now too, and she's doing great. She's married. She has 4 children. Her and her husband are actually going to be moving to Florida here at the end of January. My other daughter, Eden, who was also she ended up having a horrible addiction. She ended up being, addicted to heroin, fentanyl. She was on the street. She was homeless. That's sort of how Terminator even started. And she's also now this month, she's going to be 5 years clean and sober. Yeah, she I know, it's freaking phenomenal. And she works for Terminator now, and her and I do a lot of speaking together. And she's also so they're both my girls are they live their lives out loud too. And we're incredibly close as a family. They're close as siblings. Like this very well could have all ripped us all apart. And there were times that it looked like that's exactly what was going to happen. But, as I know, you guys know, sometimes the most horrible things that can happen to us in our lives can actually be if we work it, they can be and become the best thing that ever happened to us. Like I believe that. I'm convinced of that. And my other son, Gabriel, is just recent back into recovery. He'll be 30 days next week. Clean and sober. He's living in Oxford House in a sober housing program right now. He's training with Terminator. He's got a job. He's learning a trade. And so to be totally honest, my other son, he actually called me 10 minutes before we jumped on this call, and he's asked for a number to reach out for help. And so just praying that he, finds the help. And so, because he's been on the street, it's hard. It's hard. But I know it's, as you guys know, every person has their journey. Even our kids have their journey. It's their journey. Yeah.
It's amazing to think of just listening to you speak of your personal life growing up, and then your kids. It just sort of dawned on me now. Like, I'm always just sort of silently comparing. It's just what I do as a human being, right? Like, oh, that person had it much worse than I did. And, for me now, that awareness brings about, like, not taking things for granted, and, that we all have our own adversity, whatever level it's at. but I mean, it would suggest that your life would be horrible if your kids are doing horrible, right? What's your acceptance around that? That, like, you know, does the fourth one have to be doing amazing for you to be right? Like, what's that perspective like as a mom?
Oh, Darren, that's honestly, that's a huge, like, almost like a
It's
can
another
of
hour.
worms, that one, because as parents, we do that, right? Like, we wear our kids' success like a badge of honor. You know what I mean? So if my kids are graduating from high school and they're checking all the boxes, all the "you're a good parent" box, right? And we have lots of those boxes as parents. And so this totally, like, having, going through everything that we've been through, and like, I don't even know how many trips to rehab. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, I felt destroyed as a parent. Like, if there's an award for the shittiest parent in the world, you're gonna win it, Vanisha. Like, And so I did have to really dig deep on that one and do a lot of searching, do a lot of just really, who does this make me? And again, it does come back to all of that acceptance. It comes back to, I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't choose like, it's all of it. It's all of it. And so, yeah, no, I definitely, I know I did the best I could.
Yeah.
Even when my best was really horrible. You know what I mean? And did I have to take ownership and responsibility for that? Yeah, absolutely. 100% I did. And it was going through some of these experiences with Eden when she was in and out. Like, it was horrible. And it lasted for years, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
I remember, like, just like, she's her own person too. Like, yes, I'm raising her and I'm doing the best I can, but she's still Eden. She's still her own person.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm a dad of two small boys, and I mean, what age does that happen? You know what I mean? Where they become their own, and I know from speaking to so many moms and parents, and that there's an element that just shouldn't leave us. Like, there should always be that attachment there, and sometimes it's a blessing, and sometimes it's the most difficult thing. But I mean, nobody gets a pass on this earth, right? Like that, everything is just worked out fine for you, convenient. Now enjoy your happiness. Like, wouldn't that be nice, right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, I love it that the theme I'm picking up is, I mean, happiness is there. It's there. Forgiveness is there. Acceptance is there. But some of us, our stories require a much effort to get it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's what ordinary courage is. Like, is there such thing as special courage? Do I need a certain special courage if I've suffered abuse, or is it everybody just it's ordinary? It's just courage.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can all have it. Yeah. I totally believe that. Yeah.
That's so powerful there. That I'm glad that got sorted out too, because you don't need to, like, somebody with 10 years clean, somebody with 30 days clean. It's the same. It's the same. Like, there's, like, the person with 10 years isn't better or stronger or anything. It's like I remember one of the most powerful learning lessons about, I went to a meeting and I noticed to the left of me was the person that had amazing parents and went to Barbados and Christmas and Florida and had the boat and had the car and had the money. The person to the right of me, mother was missing, father was missing, in jail his whole life. There's me in the middle that had kind of best of all those worlds. And it's like, we're all the same. Addiction is the same. Recovery is the same. It's ordinary courage. It's a beautiful title. We've got a few minutes left. Definitely want to talk about where you're at today too with Terminator Foundation. Yes. So what's that all about?
So, well, Terminator, like I mentioned, it came out of just my experience with Eden and stuff like that, and having, because it was one thing to be like a person in recovery or an alcoholic myself or whatever, but then it was a whole other experience having a child out there and then fighting for her life and coming up against a system that basically deemed that she wasn't worthy or deserving of support because she was just a junkie, and so just coming face to face head on with that. And
you're the Sarah Connor.
Pardon?
You're the Sarah Connor of
yeah, totally. Yeah. So it just honestly, it made me angry. And that's when that was pivotal for me. And that's when I really like turned up the volume on my advocacy, on my recovery, on the message, on all of it, was because I knew my daughter.
Yeah.
I know who she is. You know what I mean? And how dare you say she's not worth it, that she's just a loser and whatever, right? And so Terminator came out of that, because just like you said, Giuseppe, that I had that sort of that same epiphany in one of my trips to rehab with Eden, where because I was a single parent, we had all this trauma happen. No wonder I have an addict kid, right? But I had parents that the parents were never divorced. They lived in the same house on the same street forever. They always ate dinner together. They traveled together, and their kid was up on the wall too. So I thought, wow, it can't all be just my, you know what I mean, what happened to us. And so it just was through that experience, I just wanted Terminator. I started the Youth Addiction Awareness Run just to raise awareness. I'm like, it was just getting worse. The fentanyl crisis was hitting, the opioid crisis was hitting, like, people were dropping, like, it was insane. And I'm just like, I realized I'm not the only person going through this. I'm not the only parent living in, again, the silence, the shame, the stigma, the stereotyping, the labels, like, and so that's where the run came from. And then a couple of years later, after doing the run, I was at my absolute worst time of my life with Eden, and I didn't know every day if she was dead or alive. And I decided to do a 70.3 Ironman. I couldn't swim. I didn't own a bike. I was a runner, but that was it. And I signed up for this Ironman, and I had 3.5 months to train. I'm in my 40s. My heart is broken. I should have just been taking some depression pills, and just lied in bed. And I decided to do this half Ironman. And then, 3.5 months later, I did the 70.3 Ironman. But that experience blew my own limitations, my own box. I didn't realize even how boxed in I had myself. And I always knew that exercise was a powerful means to, combating depression and anxiety and feeling better and blah, 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 right? But the combination of learning to swim, the biking, the running, it transformed my life. And so I just thought, if it can transform my life, what can it do for other people? What can it do for our youth? What can it do? And to me, it's so grueling doing that kind of training, like for an Ironman. It's so freaking intense. There's days you don't want to do it. Your freaking muscles hurt. Like, sometimes you don't even believe you can. Like, I couldn't even swim, but then I did it and I overcame it. And it just reminded me so much of what it's like to overcome an addiction that has had you gripped, and tormented for years. You don't even think, I remember feeling like there's no way in hell I cannot drink for 24 hours, and it's the same thing with learning to train. And so it's like, it's that beautiful collision, and it it meets them right in the middle, because I know they can do it. I'm convinced they can do it, and they do it.
So
So yeah.
if you're
Analogy for life.
watching, if you're watching or listening right now, I just want you to take a moment and look. So here you have a person who sexually abused as a child, gets a new relationship as an adult, gets married, has a partner that sexually abuses her daughter, has 3 kids, 4 kids, 3 kids in addiction, one still on the streets, one in rehab. Everything to be that person taking antidepressants and lying in bed like my life, shittiest mom award goes to me. But instead you're doing, writing a book, you're sharing your story, create the Terminator Foundation to do advocacy in your local community, if not nationally. That's I mean, it's a beautiful story. It's I if you know someone that's like, you don't understand, my life's horrible, like get them to connect with, watch this show, meet Vanisha, talk to her, you do coaching as well, because you have all the reasons to stay home in bed on pills, all the reasons to use, and you're not, and that's the power of recovery. So I just want to really point that out. Like it's an amazing story, and like you, Darren, and you said earlier, your courage isn't special. Your courage is ordinary. What a wonderful, powerful story. Thank you so much, Darren.
I love the analogy that you, like Sarah Connor, like just trying to find her kid, fighting the Terminator, like at all costs. I don't even know if that's where it came from, but it made perfect sense. It made perfect sense to me. My brain. I mean, this is it. Like, how many times I've walked through the bookstore and the celebrity, autobiographies, and I mean, it's kind of fun to finally, relate to somebody that seems like they could never go wrong, kind of thing. But to walk by a book, your book, and read it and feel that relatability, feel that hope, and also be able to be connected to the Terminator Foundation and talk with other families and get support and involve ourselves within a community, which is, I mean, where do I take my hope? If I get it sitting there reading a book by myself, where do I go? What do I do with that? When my kids are still suffering and there's still turmoil, and so that's where I want to leave the show today, is just offering Vanisha Breault's information and your website, and anybody that's listening that needs to look for some help. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You guys, I'm so grateful. Thank you. Such an honor to be here.
Vanisha, where can people find your book? Where can people find Terminator Foundation?
Okay, so the book is Ordinary Courage. It's on Amazon. So Vanisha Breault, Ordinary Courage, or you can find it on I have my personal website, vanishabreault.com. And then all of our Terminator stuff is terminatorfoundation.com.
And you take donations at Terminator Foundation?
We do take, absolutely, we take support. We are, so we're almost federally registered, actually. So
if you want to support Vanisha's Terminator Foundation or participate in some of her events, take a look at her website, and all the links are in the blog where this show is being broadcast on. So take a look there again. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Special shout out to Jordan Bowman, our show coordinator, booking our guests. If you want to be on the show, email jordan@lastdoor.org and he'll get you in there. If you have a personal story, a book, or someone that has a story that we could have fun and also be inspired by, get in touch with us. And again, powered by New West Recovery. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Darren, see you next Thursday.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Vanisha.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
We'll see you soon in Calgary, I hope. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.